someone knows what happened to Alivia Kail, someone has always known. Because on the night of March 5, 2011, a 19-year-old woman walked out of her brother's home in West Mifflin, Pennsylvania, with a man she knew. He came back. She didn't. And in the hours, days, and years that followed, no one could explain where Alivia went, or why the person last seen with her had so little to say about it. Tonight, we go back to that evening in a quiet borough just south of Pittsburgh, to the moment a young woman vanished from her family's reach and stepped into a silence that has lasted more than 15 years. Alivia Christine Kail has never been found. Her case is investigated not by a missing persons unit, but by Allegheny County Homicide. And the story of her disappearance begins with a detail that should trouble anyone who hears it. The last person known to have been with her returned alone, and the answers her family has been waiting for have never come. To understand what was lost on that March night, you have to understand who Alivia was before the headlines, before the flyers, before her photographs became part of a database that no family ever wants to see their child's face appear in. Alivia Christine Kail was born on October 16, 1991. She grew up in the communities that line the Monongahela River Valley south of Pittsburgh, the kind of western Pennsylvania towns where families are close-knit, where high school football is a religion, and where people tend to stay near the places they were raised. These are communities shaped by generations of steelworkers, coal miners, and the industries that grew up along the river. West Mifflin, the Allegheny County borough where Alivia was last seen, sits about 10 miles southeast of downtown Pittsburgh. It is a working-class community of roughly 20,000 people, a place where neighborhoods are tight, where people watch out for each other's kids, and where everybody tends to know everybody else's business. It is the kind of place where a young woman's disappearance doesn't just affect her family. It ripples through an entire community. Alivia went by the nickname Liv among those who were close to her. She was 19 years old in March of 2011, navigating the complicated territory between adolescence and adulthood that so many people that age find themselves in. She had brown hair, although she was known to dye it frequently, cycling through different colors and styles in the way that young women often do when they're still experimenting with who they want to be. Her eyes were blue-green. She stood between 5 feet and 5'1", and weighed approximately 110 pounds. She was small in stature, but the people in her life would tell you she was anything but invisible. She had a tattoo of a blue lily with swirls on her right hip. Her ears were pierced. Her nose was pierced. The right side of her upper lip was pierced. She often wore a diamond nose stud. These are the details that would later appear on missing persons databases and flyers distributed across western Pennsylvania, the identifying marks her family hoped someone, somewhere, might recognize. Alivia had connections to the West Mifflin area through her family. Her brother lived on the 500 block of Edgewood Avenue, a residential street in the heart of the borough, and it was from that address that Alivia was last seen alive. She drove a red Ford Explorer that was distinctive in the way vehicles often are in that part of the country. It had a Pittsburgh Steelers emblem displayed on it. In western Pennsylvania, Steelers loyalty runs deeper than almost anything else, and a detail like that on a vehicle is as common as the rolling hills themselves. But it was her vehicle, part of her daily routine, and it would become one of the few tangible threads investigators had to follow in the days after she disappeared. The evening of Saturday, March 5, 2011, began like any other. There was nothing about that day that signaled what was coming. The weather in the Pittsburgh area in early March is typically cold, caught in the gray grip between winter and the first tentative hints of spring. Daylight in western Pennsylvania in early March fades by 6 in the evening, and by the time full darkness settles in, the temperature drops fast. It is not a time of year when people tend to linger outside. It is a time for being indoors, for being with family, for the ordinary rhythms of a Saturday night. Alivia was at her brother's home on the 500 block of Edgewood Avenue. The details of what she did during the earlier hours of that day, who she spoke with, what she was thinking about, how she spent her time, most of that has been lost to the private nature of an ordinary Saturday that no one had reason to memorize. What is known is what she was wearing when she left: a black short-sleeved shirt, jeans, and either sneakers or Ugg boots. She wore her diamond nose stud. These are the details her family would later provide to investigators, the kind of specifics you only commit to memory when you realize they might be the last details you ever have. At some point that evening, Alivia left her brother's home. She did not leave alone. She departed with a male companion, someone she had a relationship with, someone she apparently trusted enough to walk out the door with on a cold March night. The two of them left the residence on Edgewood Avenue together and headed out into the evening. In the hours that followed, Alivia Christine Kail was never seen again. What happened next is the detail that has haunted this case for more than 15 years. The man who left with Alivia came back. He returned to the area without her. Alivia did not come back through the door. She did not call to say she was staying somewhere else. She did not text. She did not show up the next morning. The man who had been the last person to see her was back, and Alivia was gone. And the explanation for what had happened between the time they left together and the time he returned alone, the explanation that Alivia's family has spent more than 15 years waiting to hear, has never been adequately provided. He came back without her, and, according to those who have followed this case, the silence around that fact has been deafening. When Alivia failed to return and could not be reached by any means, concern set in quickly among her family. For a 19-year-old to be out of contact for a few hours on a Saturday night might not ordinarily raise alarm. But the circumstances here were different. The person she left with had come back without her. She was not answering her phone. There was no indication of where she had gone or when she might return. Something about the entire situation felt deeply wrong. The kind of instinctive dread that families describe in the hours before they know for certain that their loved one is in danger. This was not Alivia choosing to stay out late. This was not a miscommunication about plans. Alivia was missing, and the circumstances of her disappearance pointed towards something far more sinister than a voluntary departure. Her family reported her disappearance to law enforcement, and from the very beginning, the way authorities handled this case signaled that they understood the gravity of the situation. The Allegheny County Police were brought in, and critically, the case was not assigned to a missing persons unit. It was assigned to the Allegheny County Homicide Division. That word, homicide, carries enormous weight. It means that the investigators who evaluated the circumstances of Alivia's disappearance concluded that this was not a case of a young woman who had simply chosen to start over somewhere new. The homicide designation meant that law enforcement believed, based on the available evidence and the circumstances reported to them, that foul play was involved. It meant they believed that Alivia's disappearance was the result of a criminal act, that someone had done something to this young woman, and that the investigation needed to be conducted with the full resources and authority of a homicide inquiry. It is worth pausing here to understand how significant that classification is. The vast majority of missing persons cases in Allegheny County, and across the country, are handled by standard detective bureaus or missing persons units. For a case to be referred to homicide investigators from the outset, the circumstances have to suggest strongly that the missing person is the victim of a violent crime. The fact that Alivia's case was placed under homicide jurisdiction tells us that investigators saw something in the initial reports, in the timeline, in the circumstances of her departure and her companion's return, in the absence of any innocent explanation. That pointed them toward the worst possible conclusion. This was not a formality. This was a statement of intent by law enforcement. They believed Alivia had been harmed, and they were going to investigate it as such. The early investigation moved along the lines that any experienced homicide detective would follow in a case like this. Alivia's red Ford Explorer, the one with the Pittsburgh Steelers emblem, became an immediate focal point. The movements and ultimate disposition of that vehicle were among the few pieces of physical evidence that could be traced. Where had the vehicle gone on the night of March 5th? Where was it now? Who had been driving it, and when? In a case where the missing woman herself had left behind almost no physical trail after walking out of her brother's home, the vehicle represented a critical thread. Investigators canvassed the neighborhood around the 500 block of Edgewood Avenue. In a community like West Mifflin, a canvass can be productive. Neighbors tend to be observant. They tend to remember things. They tend to notice when something is out of the ordinary. Detectives knocked on doors, asked questions, tried to piece together whether anyone had seen Alivia that evening, whether anyone had noticed the red Ford Explorer, whether anyone had heard or seen anything unusual in the hours after she left her brother's home. They spoke with family members, friends, and acquaintances. They focused significant attention on the individual who had been the last known person to see Alivia, the man who left with her and returned without her. In any missing persons investigation, and especially in one that has been classified under homicide, the last person to see the missing individual alive is the single most important witness. When that person left with the missing woman and came back alone, the investigative focus intensifies dramatically. The questions that detectives would have asked are the same questions that Alivia's family was asking. Where did you go? What happened? When did you last see her? Where was she when you left? Why did you come back without her? The answers to those questions, whatever they were, have not resulted in public charges as of this telling. What is known is that the case remained active with the Homicide Unit, that investigators continued to pursue leads, and that the investigation was never downgraded or reclassified. The Allegheny County Homicide Division does not maintain a case under its purview without reason. The continued classification tells you that investigators still believe a crime was committed, that they still believe the truth can be found, and that the case has never been abandoned. In the early days of the investigation, time was the enemy. In missing persons cases, the first 48 hours are widely understood to be the most critical window for locating the missing individual. Every hour that passes without finding them makes the task exponentially more difficult. Physical evidence degrades. Trails grow cold. Witnesses' memories begin to shift and fade. For Alivia's family, those first days were a waking nightmare, the agonizing limbo between the hope that she might still be found alive and the growing dread that the homicide designation on her case might prove to be well-founded. Search efforts were mounted in the areas surrounding West Mifflin and the broader Allegheny County region. The terrain of western Pennsylvania presents formidable challenges for any search operation. The landscape south of Pittsburgh is characterized by steep, wooded hillsides that rise sharply from narrow creek valleys. Dense forest covers vast stretches of undeveloped land. Old industrial infrastructure, abandoned rail lines, shuttered factories, overgrown lots, dots the landscape between residential areas. The Monongahela River and its tributaries carve through the terrain, adding waterways and their associated banks, bluffs, and floodplains to the geography that search teams would need to cover. There are countless places in that landscape where someone, or something, could be concealed, where the land itself seems to close around its secrets and hold them tight. Search operations covered what ground they could, but the sheer scope of the terrain, combined with the uncertainty about where Alivia might have gone after leaving Edgewood Avenue, made the task extraordinarily difficult. Alivia was not found. The complete absence of any trace of Alivia after March 5, 2011, only deepened the conviction that she had not left voluntarily. 19-year-olds who choose to disappear on their own terms, who decide to start over somewhere new, who leave behind a difficult situation by simply walking away, almost always surface eventually. They use a bank card, they reach out to a friend on social media, they apply for a job using their real name, they contact a family member when enough time has passed and emotions have cooled. The digital and financial footprints of modern life make it extraordinarily difficult for anyone to simply vanish without a trace unless someone has ensured they cannot be found. Alivia did none of the things that voluntary missing persons typically do. There were no confirmed sightings. There was no financial activity under her name. There was no contact with anyone who knew her. The silence was total, and it was the kind of silence that speaks volumes about what likely happened. Alivia's information was entered into the national databases that serve as the last line of visibility for missing persons in this country. Her case appeared on the Charlie Project, one of the most comprehensive and respected missing persons databases in the United States, maintained by dedicated volunteers who understand that keeping these cases visible is essential to keeping them alive. She was listed on NAMUS, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System maintained by the National Institute of Justice, which serves as a critical clearinghouse for matching missing persons reports with unidentified remains recovered anywhere in the country. Every time unidentified remains are found, in a wooded area, along a riverbank, in an abandoned structure, they are entered into NAMUS and cross-referenced against the physical descriptions, dental records, and DNA profiles of missing persons like Alivia. It is a grim but essential system, and Alivia's presence in it means that if her remains are ever recovered, the connection to her identity can be made. Her photographs, multiple images showing different hairstyles and hair colors, a visual record of the frequent changes she was known for, were circulated on these platforms and through law enforcement channels. Every identifying detail was documented. The blue lily tattoo with swirls on her right hip, the piercings in her ears, nose, and upper lip, the height and weight, the clothing she was last seen wearing, the red Ford Explorer with the Steelers emblem. All of it was cataloged and distributed in the hope that someone, somewhere, would see something they recognized. As the weeks became months and the months became years, the weight of Alivia's absence settled into the lives of everyone who loved her. There is no instruction manual for this kind of loss. Other forms of grief, as devastating as they are, at least carry the grim clarity of knowing what happened. A funeral, a burial, a final goodbye. These rituals exist because human beings need a way to process the ending of a life. The families of missing persons are denied even that most basic form of closure. They exist in a state of permanent uncertainty, suspended between hope and despair, unable to mourn completely because there has been no confirmed death, unable to move forward because there has been no resolution, unable to stop searching because absence is not the same as proof. It is a particular kind of torment. Psychologists call it ambiguous loss, and it is one that Alivia's family has endured for more than 15 years. Alivia was born in 1991. Had she not vanished on that March evening, she would have turned 20 that October. She would have celebrated her 25th birthday, then her 30th. As of this telling, she would be 34 years old. An entire adult life has unfolded in her absence, more than 15 years in which she might have found a career, built a family, traveled, laughed, grown into the person she was meant to become. The years between 19 and 34 are some of the most formative and transformative years of any person's life. The years when you figure out who you are, what you believe in, what kind of life you want to build, All of that was taken from Alivia on a single night, and all of it was taken from the family who should have been there to witness every milestone, every triumph, every ordinary Tuesday that makes up the fabric of a life well lived. Through it all, Alivia's family has refused to let her be forgotten. They have worked to keep her name visible, to keep her photographs circulating, to keep the public aware that their daughter, their sister, their Liv, is still out there somewhere, still waiting to be found, still deserving of answers. They have understood what every family in this situation comes to understand: that public attention is the lifeline of a cold case. The moment a name fades from public memory, the moment a missing person becomes just another photograph on a database page that nobody clicks on, the chances of resolution begin to shrink. Alivia's family has fought against that fading with everything they have. The Allegheny County Police Homicide Unit continues to carry this case. It remains open. It remains classified as an active investigation. And in the world of cold case work, that matters. An active homicide case means that investigators are still prepared to pursue leads, that new evidence can still be evaluated, that the machinery of justice can still be set in motion if the right piece of information comes forward. Cold cases are not dead cases. They are cases that are waiting for the tip, the confession, the forensic breakthrough, the shift in relationships or loyalties that causes someone to finally pick up the phone and say what they know. In the years since Alivia disappeared, the field of forensic investigation has advanced dramatically. DNA technology has grown more sensitive and more sophisticated, capable of extracting usable genetic profiles from smaller, more degraded, and more contaminated samples than was ever possible in 2011. Digital forensics, the ability to reconstruct communications, trace movements through cellular data, recover deleted files and messages, map social connections through electronic records, has become vastly more powerful. And genetic genealogy, a technique that did not exist in any practical law enforcement capacity when Alivia vanished, has since been used to identify previously unknown suspects in cases that had been cold for decades. Whether these tools can be applied to Alivia's case depends on the evidence that investigators have been able to preserve and, critically, on the willingness of those who possess relevant knowledge to cooperate with the investigation. But no amount of technology can replace the power of a human conscience. The most sophisticated forensic tools in the world cannot match the impact of someone deciding that they are ready to tell the truth. And in case after case, across jurisdictions and across decades, the break in a cold investigation has come not from a laboratory, but from a person. A relationship ends. A loyalty shifts. A guilt that has been suppressed for years rises to the surface and demands to be spoken. Someone who was afraid in 2011 finds themselves in a different place in 2026, and the calculation changes. The cost of silence becomes greater than the cost of speaking. There is a particular frustration that hangs over this case, and it is this: the circumstances of Alivia's disappearance point toward answers that are specific, knowable, and held by an identifiable person or persons. This is not a random disappearance. A woman plucked from a highway rest stop by an unknown assailant. A case with no witnesses and no starting point. There is a starting point here. There is a last known companion. There is a defined timeline. There are questions that have concrete answers, and those answers exist in someone's memory right now, at this very moment, as these words are being spoken. Someone knows what happened to Alivia Kail after she left Edgewood Avenue. Someone has always known. Alivia Christine Kail was 19 years old when she disappeared. She had brown hair that she loved to change. She had blue-green eyes that caught the light. She had a tattoo of a blue lily with swirls on her right hip, a small quiet piece of art that she chose for herself. She wore a diamond stud in her nose. She drove a red Ford Explorer with a Pittsburgh Steelers emblem on it because she was a Western Pennsylvania girl through and through. And in that part of the country, loyalty to the black and gold is woven into the fabric of who you are. She was someone's daughter. She was someone's sister. She was Liv to the people who loved her. She stood barely 5 feet tall, but she was never meant to be invisible. She was never meant to become a case number, a database entry, an unanswered question that stretches across 15 years of silence. Her family has never stopped looking for her. They have never stopped asking the questions that should have been answered on the night of March 5, 2011. They have never stopped believing that the truth is out there, not buried in some unreachable place, but carried in the memory of someone who could end their suffering with a single act of honesty. And they have never stopped hoping that the person carrying that truth will find the courage, at last, to let it go. If you have any information about the disappearance of Alivia Christine Kail, please contact the Allegheny County Police Homicide Unit at 4124701-300. No piece of information is too small. No amount of time makes a tip irrelevant. What you know could be the thing that finally brings Alivia home and gives her family the answers they have been waiting more than 15 years to hear. Every case deserves an answer. Every family deserves the truth. If this story stays with you, consider subscribing to Echo of Evidence. We tell the stories of cold cases that deserve renewed attention, because every name on a missing persons list was once a real person with a real life, and none of them should ever be forgotten.